Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Defiant and watched the alien ships move through space like dancers. Their hulls shined with perfect metal and strange lights that pulsed in colors he had never seen before. The Zephyrian cruisers looked like giant crystals that had been carved by master artists. The Mortai ships seemed alive, their surfaces moving like skin. The Kelani destroyers flickered in and out of sight as they bent space around them. Then, Jake looked at his own ship. The Defiant had started life as a mining vessel 20 years ago. Her hull was covered in patches and scars from 100 small fights. The paint was faded and chipped. 3 of her weapon mounts had been welded on by hand after the last battle. The reactor made strange noises that kept the engineer awake at night. Most people would call her ugly. Most people would be right. "Sir, we're getting another message." "From the Zephyrian flagship," said Lieutenant Lisa Park from her station. She was young, maybe 25, with short brown hair and quick fingers that danced over her controls. "Admiral Cathvor wants to know why we're still in formation with the real warships." Jake sighed. He had heard this kind of talk for 3 months now, ever since Earth had joined the Galactic Council. The aliens treated humans like children who had wandered into an adult conversation. They smiled and nodded when human representatives spoke, but their eyes said they were just being polite. What exactly did he say? Jake asked. Lisa's cheeks turned red. "He called us the scrap heap with delusions, sir. He said we should stay in the back with the supply ships where we belong." Commander Pete Davis looked up from the tactical display. Pete was Jake's second in command and his oldest friend. They had served together for 15 years, through 3 wars and countless battles. Pete was the kind of man who could fix anything with spare parts and stubbornness. "At least he's honest about it," Pete said. "The Mortai captain just ignores us completely. Acts like we don't exist." Jake walked to the main view screen and stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, an enemy was coming that made all their previous wars look like playground fights. The Void Seekers had appeared 6 months ago from the center of the galaxy. They were machines, but not like any machines the Council had ever seen. They learned from every battle. They adapted to every weapon. They consumed entire star systems and left nothing but empty space behind. 12 systems had fallen already. Billions of people were dead. The Council's best minds had studied the wreckage and the few survivors' reports. The Void Seekers could absorb energy weapons and turn the power against their enemies. They could phase through solid matter when quantum weapons tried to hit them. Bioweapons simply bounced off their hulls like raindrops. "Sir?" called Chief Engineer Amy Rodriguez from the engine room over the comm system. Amy was small and tough, the kind of person who could make broken machines run with nothing but willpower and creative cursing. "I'm reading some weird vibrations. In the hull. Feels like something big is moving out there." Jake frowned. "The Council fleet is running full sensor sweeps. If there was something out there, they would have found it." "Maybe, sir. But our sensors are picking up something theirs aren't. Old-fashioned resonance detection. The kind of stuff we used back when humans were still figuring out space travel." Pete looked interested. "What kind of vibrations?" "Mechanical ones. Like big engines running at low power. The frequency is all wrong for any of the Council ships." Jake felt a cold feeling in his stomach. "Amy, can you track the source?" "Working on it, sir. Give me a few minutes." While Amy worked, Jake thought about their situation. The Defiant carried a crew of 37 humans. They had railguns that fired chunks of metal at high speed. They had missiles with explosive warheads. They had a mining laser that had been modified to cut through asteroid rock. All of their weapons were simple, crude, and old-fashioned. The aliens had moved beyond such primitive tools centuries ago. The Council fleet around them represented the best military technology in the galaxy. The Zephyrian ships could fire beams of pure energy that could crack a planet. The Mortai vessels grew new weapons from their living hulls. The Kelani destroyers could make enemy ships simply stop existing. Next to them, the Defiant looked like a wooden club in a room full of laser cannons. "Got it," Amy's voice crackled over the comm. "The vibrations are coming from something about 50,000 kilometers to port. It's moving slow and steady toward the inner system." Jake checked the star charts. The inner system contained 3 planets. 2 were gas giants with mining stations. The third was Titan's Edge, a rocky world with 40,000 human colonists. It was one of the newest human settlements, far from Earth and barely defended. "Lisa, try to raise Admiral Kethver. Tell him we've detected an unknown contact." Lisa worked her controls for a moment. "Sir, the Admiral says they've run full scans and found nothing. He wants to know if our sensors are malfunctioning again." Again, Jake remembered the last time they had reported a sensor contact. It had turned out to be a piece of space debris that their old equipment had mistaken for a ship. The Zephyrian officers had made jokes about human technology for weeks. "Pete, what do you think?" Pete studied the sensor readings on his screen. "Amy knows her business, Jake. If she says something's out there, something's out there. The question is what we do about it." Jake made a decision that would change everything. "Set course for the contact. Quiet running. I want to see what we're dealing with before we call in the cavalry." "Sir," Lisa said carefully, "Admiral Kethver gave us specific orders to maintain position with the fleet. Admiral Kethver thinks we're flying junk held together with hope and spare parts. Let's prove him wrong." The Defiant turned away from the Council fleet and headed into empty space. Her engines were quiet but steady. Her sensors, old and simple as they were, tracked the mysterious contact with growing certainty. Whatever was out there, it was big, and it was headed for human space. Now Jake stood on his bridge and felt the familiar weight of command. His ship might not look like much, but his crew knew their business. Lisa Park could make their communications. System talked to anything with circuits. Pete Davis could fight a battle with a broken calculator and win. Amy Rodriguez could keep their engines running on scrap metal and determination. The rest of his crew were just as good, men and women who had chosen to serve on the ugliest ship in the fleet because they believed in something bigger than themselves. "Contact is changing course," Pete reported. "It's definitely heading for Titan's Edge." Jake felt his hands clench into fists. 40,000 people lived on that world. Families, children, people who had come to the edge of known space to build something new. If the Void Seekers had found them, those people would. "Need help. Amy, I need every bit of speed you can give me." "You got it, Captain. But if we push too hard, the other ships will hear us coming." "Let them hear us. We've got work to do." The Defiant accelerated toward an unknown enemy, her crew ready for whatever they would find. Behind them, the great ships of the Galactic Council continued their perfect formations, unaware that the war they had been preparing for was about to begin with the ship they trusted least. The Defiant moved through space like a hunting cat, quiet and careful. Jake Morrison stood behind Amy Rodriguez as she worked at her engineering station. Her fingers moved over controls that looked like they belonged in a museum. The screens flickered and showed numbers that meant nothing to most people, but Amy could read them like a book. "Still tracking the contact, Captain," Amy said without looking up. "Whatever it is, it's about 3 kilometers long and moving at steady speed. No energy signature that our sensors can pick up, but the mechanical vibrations are getting stronger." Pete Davis checked his weapon systems for the 10th time in an hour. The railguns were loaded with depleted uranium rounds. The missiles were armed and ready. The mining laser was charged to full power. Everything worked, but Pete knew their weapons were nothing compared to what the Council ships carried. "Jake," Pete said quietly, "if this really is a Void Seeker, we're flying into a meat grinder. Our weapons have never been tested against their adaptive hulls." Jake nodded. He had read every report about the Void Seekers that Earth Command had sent them. The enemy ships could change their structure to resist different types of attacks. Energy weapons got absorbed and redirected. Quantum weapons phased right through them. Bioweapons were neutralized before they could take effect. The Void Seekers learned from every battle and became harder to kill. "Maybe that's exactly why we might have a chance," Jake said. "They've never fought weapons like ours." Lisa Park looked up from her communication station. "Sir, I'm picking up a transmission from Titan's Edge. It's automated, but the signal is weak and breaking up. Put it through." The speaker crackled with static, and a recorded voice came through. "This is Titan's Edge colony control to any ships in the area. We are detecting large objects on approach vector. Unable to identify. Request immediate assistance. Repeat, we need help." Jake felt ice in his stomach. 40,000 people lived on Titan's Edge. Most were families who had left Earth to start. New lives on the frontier. They had some mining equipment and a few old patrol boats, but nothing that could fight a real enemy. "How long until we reach the contact?" Jake asked. Amy checked her calculations. "At current speed, about 2 hours. But Captain, if we increase power, we might be able to get there in 90 minutes. Do it. And Amy, I want you to run a full diagnostic on all our weapons. Make sure everything is working perfectly." "Already on it, sir. The rail guns are firing true, missiles are all green, and the mining laser is running at 105% of normal power." Jake walked to the main view screen and stared out at the stars. Somewhere ahead of them was an enemy that had destroyed 12 star systems. Behind them was a fleet of advanced alien ships that considered the Defiant a joke. In between was his crew of 37 humans who had volunteered to serve on the ugliest ship in space. "Sir," Lisa called out, "I'm getting another transmission. This one is direct from the contact." "What kind of transmission?" "It's not words, sir. It's more like a scan. Something is looking at us." Jake felt the hair on his neck stand up. "Can you block it?" "I'm trying, but whatever is doing the scanning is using frequencies I've never seen before. It's like they're reading our ship from the inside out." Pete looked at his tactical display. "Jake, we've got a problem. The contact has changed course. It's moving faster now, and it's heading straight for us." "How fast?" "Fast enough to reach us in 30 minutes if we keep our current course." Jake made a decision. "All stop battle stations. If they want to fight, we'll give them one." The Defiant came to a halt in empty space. Her crew moved to their battle positions with practiced efficiency. They had drilled for this moment 100 times, but everyone knew this would be different. This was real. "Contact is slowing down," Pete reported. "It's about 10,000 kilometers out and closing. Can you get a visual?" Pete worked his controls, and the main screen changed. At first, Jake saw nothing but stars. Then something moved across the screen, blocking out the light behind it. The ship was like nothing Jake had ever seen. It was black, darker than space itself. Its hull seemed to absorb light instead of reflecting it. The shape was wrong somehow, like it had been designed by something that didn't understand how ships were supposed to look. "Dear God," Lisa whispered, "is that a Void Seeker?" Jake studied the alien ship. It was bigger than the Defiant, but not by much, maybe twice their size. But there was something about it that made his skin crawl. It moved like it was alive, shifting, and changing shape as he watched. "Amy, are you recording this?" "Every second of it, Captain. Earth Command is going to want to see this." The alien ship came to a stop about 5,000 kilometers away. For a long moment, nothing happened. Both ships hung in space, studying each other. Jake could feel his crew's tension. Everyone was waiting for something to happen. "It's scanning." "US again," Lisa reported, much more intensive this time. "I think it's trying to figure out what we are." "Let it look," Jake said. "Pete, target the center of that thing with everything we've got. If it makes any hostile moves, I want to hit it hard and fast." Pete's hands moved over his weapons controls. Railguns locked on target. Missiles ready. Mining laser charged to maximum. The alien ship began to change. Its hull rippled like water, and Jake could see new structures forming on its surface. Weapon ports opened like eyes, and energy began to build up inside them. "They're powering weapons," Pete said. "Multiple energy projectors. Whatever they're planning to hit us with, it's going to hurt." Jake had seconds to make a choice that would determine whether his crew lived or died. The Void Seeker was preparing to attack, but it was still studying them. It probably thought the Defiant was just another council ship with energy weapons. And quantum technology thought it was wrong. "Pete, fire everything." Right now, the Defiant's weapons spoke as one. Railgun rounds streaked across space at tremendous speed. Missiles followed a split second later, their engines burning bright against the darkness. The mining laser fired last, a focused beam of coherent light that could cut through solid rock. The Void Seeker's adaptive systems tried to respond. Jake could see its hull changing, trying to shift into a configuration that could absorb energy. Weapons, but the railgun rounds hit first, and they were not energy. They were chunks of metal moving at incredible speed. The uranium rounds punched through the alien hull like it was made of paper. Explosions rippled across the Void Seeker's surface as internal systems were destroyed. The ship tried to adapt, but it had never encountered purely kinetic weapons before. The missiles hit next, their explosive warheads detonating against a hull that was no longer solid. More explosions tore through the alien ship. Finally, the mining laser found its target, cutting deep into the Void Seeker's core. "Direct hits on all weapons," Pete shouted. "The target is breaking apart." Jake watched in amazement as the alien ship came apart like a puzzle being taken apart by a giant hand. Pieces of dark metal spun away into space. Energy discharges flickered and died. In less than a minute, the ship that had seemed so terrifying was nothing but debris. "Lisa, send a message to Admiral Cathfer. Tell him we've just destroyed a Void Seeker ship." Lisa's hands shook as she opened the communication channel. "Sir, they're going to think we're making this up. Then we'll show them the wreckage." The communication channel crackled with static before Admiral Cathver's voice came through. The Zephyrian admiral sounded angry and confused. "Human vessel, repeat your last transmission. Did you claim to have destroyed a Void Seeker ship?" "Jake." Morrison looked at the debris field floating in space around the Defiant. Twisted pieces of dark metal drifted slowly, some still sparking with dying energy. It was hard to believe that minutes ago, those pieces had been a ship that could destroy entire planets. "That's correct, Admiral. We engaged and destroyed a Void Seeker scout vessel. Transmitting debris analysis and battle recordings now." Lisa Park worked quickly at her communications station, sending the data to the Council fleet. Jake could hear other voices in the background of the transmission. The aliens were talking fast in their own languages, and they sounded excited or scared. Maybe both. "Impossible," Admiral Cathver said after a long pause. "Our intelligence. Reports state that Void Seeker vessels cannot be destroyed by conventional weapons. Your crude kinetic weapons should have no effect on their adaptive hulls." Pete Davis looked up from his tactical station with a grin. "Guess their intelligence was wrong, Admiral." Jake held up a hand to keep Pete quiet. This was not the time to make jokes. "Admiral, with respect, I suggest you review our sensor data. The Void Seeker's adaptive systems were designed to counter energy weapons, quantum technology, and biomechanical attacks. They had no defense against solid projectiles. Amy Rodriguez called out from the engineering station. Captain, I'm picking up more contacts. Multiple ships, much larger than the Scout. They're coming from the direction of the Galactic core. Jake felt his stomach drop. How many? At least 50, sir. Maybe more. They're still too far out for accurate count, but they're moving fast. Much faster than the Scout was. Admiral Kethver's voice cut through the static. Captain Morrison, you will return to the fleet immediately. If more Void Seekers are approaching, we need every ship in defensive formation. Jake looked at the tactical display. The main Void Seeker fleet was heading straight for the Kepler system. They would arrive in less than 6 hours. The Council fleet was powerful, but Jake had seen what happened when advanced weapons met Void Seeker adaptive technology. The aliens would lose, and lose badly. Admiral, I respectfully request permission to study the wreckage first. We need to understand exactly why our weapons worked when yours failed. Denied. Return to formation now. Jake closed the communication channel and turned to his crew. They were all looking at him, waiting for orders. These people had followed him through 3 wars and countless battles. They trusted him to make the right choices, even when those choices seemed impossible. Amy, how long do we need to analyze the wreckage? Give me 2 hours, Captain. I want to understand their hull composition and see if we can figure out how their adaptive systems work. Lisa, send a message to Titan's Edge. Tell them to begin immediate evacuation procedures. They have 6 hours to get as many people off-world as possible. Sir, Pete said quietly, if we stay here to study the wreckage, we'll be alone when the main fleet arrives. Jake nodded. He had thought about that. The Defiant against 50 or more Void Seeker ships was not good odds. But if they could learn something that would help the Council fleet fight more effectively, it might be worth the risk. I know, Pete, but we might be the only ship that can figure out how to beat them. The Council fleet will try to fight with energy weapons and quantum technology. They'll lose every ship, and then the Void Seekers will move on to Earth. Amy was already working, using the Defiant's small shuttle to collect pieces of wreckage. The shuttle's manipulator arms grabbed chunks of the alien hull and brought them back to the ship's cargo bay. Amy suited up and went to examine the pieces. Directly. This is incredible. Amy's voice came over the com from the cargo bay. The hull material can shift its molecular structure in response to different types of energy. When our railgun rounds hit it, the system tried to adapt, but it was designed for energy, not kinetic force. Jake walked down to the cargo bay to see for himself. Amy had pieces of the Void Seeker hull laid out on examination tables. Under normal light, the material looked like black metal. But when Amy shined different types of energy on it, the surface changed color and texture. Watch this, Amy said. She pointed a small energy weapon at one piece of hull. The metal seemed to drink in the energy, absorbing it completely. Now watch what happens with this. She picked up a hammer and hit another piece of hull. The metal cracked and shattered like glass. Their adaptive systems were built to handle energy-based attacks, Amy explained. But they never encountered anything as simple as a chunk of metal moving really fast. It's like they designed armor to stop bullets, but forgot about clubs. Jake picked up one of the broken pieces. It felt strange in his hands, warm and slightly soft. Can you figure out how their sensors work? How do they detect and adapt to new weapons? Working on it, Captain. But I think their scanning systems are also energy-based. They analyze the electromagnetic signatures of weapons and defenses. Our railguns don't have electromagnetic signatures. They're just metal and momentum. Lisa's voice crackled over the comm. Captain, Urgent message from Admiral Kethver. Council fleet is forming up for battle. The Void Seekers will be here in 4 hours. Jake made a decision. Amy, pack up everything you can carry. We need to get back to the fleet and share what we've learned. Sir, I need more time. There's so much we don't understand about their technology. We'll have to make do with what we have. If we're right about their weaknesses, the Council fleet needs to know before the battle starts. The Defiant left the debris field and headed back toward the Council fleet at maximum speed. Behind them, the wreckage of the Void Seeker Scout drifted. In space, the first enemy ship destroyed in what would become the most important battle in galactic history. When they reached the fleet, Jake immediately requested a meeting with all the Council commanders. Admiral Kethver was reluctant, but the other species wanted to hear what the humans had learned. The meeting took place on the Zephyrian flagship in a conference room that looked like the inside of a crystal cave. Jake stood in front of the assembled alien commanders and explained what they had discovered. He showed them recordings of the battle, analysis of the wreckage, and Amy's theories about how Void Seeker adaptive systems worked. You're suggesting, said Commander Morthek, of the Biofleet, that our advanced weapons are useless against this enemy? Not useless, Jake replied, but predictable. The Void Seekers have fought energy-based civilizations for thousands of years. They've learned to counter every advanced weapon system in the galaxy, but they've never fought anything as simple as kinetic weapons. Admiral Kethver studied the data on his crystal display. Even if you're correct, Captain Morrison, we cannot refit our entire fleet with primitive weapons in 4 hours. You don't need to refit, Jake said. You need to change tactics. Use your energy weapons to herd the Void Seekers into kill zones. Let the Defiant do the actual destroying. The alien commanders looked at each other. The idea of their advanced fleets serving as support for one primitive human ship was almost insulting. But the evidence was clear. The Defiant had destroyed a Void Seeker vessel in minutes, using weapons the aliens had abandoned centuries ago. One ship against 50 or more enemies, said Captain Veltar of the Quantum Destroyers. The odds are not favorable, Jake smiled. Admiral, we're humans. Bad odds are what we do best. The Void Seeker fleet appeared at the edge of the Kepler system like a dark storm cloud rolling across the sky. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiant and watched the enemy ships on his tactical display. There were more than 50. There were more than 100. The computer stopped counting at 250 contacts. Dear God, Pete Davis whispered. There's so many of them. Each Void Seeker ship was different from the others, but they all shared the same terrible darkness. Their hulls absorbed light and seemed to bend space around them. Some were long and thin like spears. Others were round like dark planets. A few were shapes that hurt to look at, as if they had been designed by something that didn't understand. Normal geometry. Admiral Kethver's voice came over the communication channel. All ships form defensive line formation. Prepare for engagement. Jake watched as the Council fleet moved into position. 130 ships representing the best military technology in the galaxy. Zephyrian crystal cruisers that could fire beams of pure energy. Mortai bioships that could grow new weapons during battle. Kalani quantum destroyers that could make enemy ships simply disappear. Each ship was worth 10 primitive vessels like the Defiant. Captain, Lisa Park called from her communication station. Admiral Kethver is ordering us to take position in the rear guard with the supply ships. Jake expected this. The alien commanders had listened to his presentation about kinetic weapons, but they still thought of the Defiant as a liability. They wanted to keep the humans out of the way while the real warships fought the battle. Lisa, open a channel to Admiral Kethver. Channel open, sir. Admiral, request permission to take point position. The Defiant should be leading the attack, not hiding in the back. Admiral Kethvor's response was immediate and sharp. Denied, Captain Morrison. Your ship will remain in reserve position. We cannot risk our only effective weapon against these enemies. Jake felt anger rise in his chest. Only effective weapon? The aliens finally understood that human weapons could hurt the Void Seekers, but they still thought of his crew as tools to be used rather than soldiers to fight alongside. Amy, Jake called to the engineering station. What's our weapon status? All systems green, Captain. Railguns loaded with armor-piercing rounds. Missiles armed and ready. Mining laser at full power. We're ready for whatever comes. The Void Seeker fleet began to move forward. They didn't maintain neat formations like the Council ships. Instead, they flowed through space like a school of deadly fish, constantly changing position and speed. Jake could see the lead ships beginning to change shape as they prepared for battle. First wave of enemy ships entering weapons range. Pete reported. Council fleet is opening fire. The space between the two fleets lit up with weapons fire. Beams of energy lanced out from the Zephyrian cruisers, each shot carrying enough power to destroy a small moon. The Mortai ships launched living projectiles that moved like guided missiles. The Kelani destroyers fired weapons that twisted space itself. For a moment, Jake thought the Council fleet might actually win. The combined firepower was incredible, enough to shatter planets and boil away atmospheres. But then the Void Seeker ships began to adapt. The energy beams struck the lead enemy ships and simply disappeared, absorbed into hulls that shifted to drink in the power. The bioweapons were neutralized before they could reach their targets, destroyed by some kind of defensive field. The quantum weapons passed through the Void Seeker ships as if they weren't there at all. They're not even slowing down, Pete said in amazement at the Void Seekers' return fire. Dark energy erupted from their weapons, striking the Council ships with terrible force. Jake watched in horror as a Zephyrian cruiser simply broke apart, its crystal hull shattering like glass. A Mortai bioship screamed over the communication channels as it died, its living systems failing all at once. Admiral Kethvar to all ships. The alien commander's voice was strained. Reform defensive positions. Concentrate fire on lead enemy vessels. But it was too late. The Void Seekers had learned everything they needed to know about Council weapons. In the first exchange, now they moved through the defensive line like sharks through a school of fish. More ships died, their advanced technology useless against an enemy that could adapt faster than they could fight. Jake made a decision that would change the course of the battle. Pete, plot an intercept course for the nearest group of enemy ships. Amy, give me everything the engines can handle. Sir, Lisa said urgently, Admiral Kethvar ordered us to maintain position. Admiral Kethvar is about to lose his entire fleet, Jake replied. Unless we do something right now, everyone dies. The Defiant broke formation and accelerated toward the battle. Her engines, old and patched as they were, pushed her forward at maximum speed. Jake could hear the hull creaking under the strain, but Amy kept the power flowing. Captain, Pete called out, I'm tracking 5 enemy ships heading for the Zephyrian flagship. They'll intercept in 3 minutes. Then we'd better get there first. All weapons, prepare to fire on my command. Jake watched the tactical display as the Defiant raced to intercept the Void Seeker ships. The enemy vessels were sleek and fast, but the Defiant had a head start and the advantage of surprise. The Void Seekers probably thought the human ship was running away from the battle, not charging into it. Weapons range in 30 seconds, Pete announced. Amy, I need every bit of power you can give me. We're only going to get one shot at this before they adapt to our weapons. You got it. Captain, reactor at 110%. Any higher and we risk a meltdown. Jake could feel the ship vibrating around him as the reactor pushed beyond safe limits. A Defiant had been built to mine asteroids, not fight in space battles. But she had been modified and upgraded by human engineers who understood that sometimes you had to make do with what you had. Firing range, Pete called out. Fire everything. The Defiant's weapons spoke as one. Railgun rounds streaked across space, followed by missiles with explosive warheads. The mining laser fired last, a coherent beam of energy that could cut through solid rock. The first Void Seeker ship tried to adapt to the incoming fire. Jake could see its hull shifting, trying to find a configuration that could absorb or deflect the attack. But kinetic weapons didn't care about adaptive hulls. The railgun rounds punched through the enemy ship like it was made of paper. The ship exploded in a ball of dark energy and twisted metal. The other 4 Void Seekers immediately changed course, trying to understand what had just happened. They had fought energy weapons and quantum weapons and bioweapons. They had never encountered anything as simple as chunks of metal moving at high speed. Target destroyed, Pete shouted. Engaging second target. The Defiant swung around and fired. Again, another Void Seeker ship died, its adaptive systems useless against primitive human weapons. Then another. And another. Admiral Kethvar to Captain Morrison. The alien commander's voice came over the communication channel. How can we assist you? Jake smiled as he watched the remaining Void Seeker ships try to retreat from his lone vessel. Form up behind us. Admiral, use your energy weapons to drive them toward our guns. We'll handle the killing. For the first time since the battle began, the Council fleet had hope. The battle for the Kepler system turned into something no one had ever seen before. The Defiant flew through the middle of the Void Seeker fleet like a wolf among sheep, her primitive weapons tearing through enemy ships that had seemed invincible. Just minutes before, behind her, the Council fleet followed in a new formation that Admiral Kethvar would never have imagined using. Jake Morrison stood on his bridge and watched the tactical display with amazement. The plan was working. The Zephyrian cruisers used their energy weapons to push groups of Void Seekers into tight formations. The Mortai bioships herded stragglers back toward the main groups. The Kelani quantum destroyers used their space-bending weapons to block escape routes. Then the Defiant would charge in with guns blazing, destroying everything in her path. 37 enemy ships destroyed, Pete Davis called out from his weapon station. His voice was hoarse from calling out targets, but his hands never stopped. Moving over the controls. Ammunition down to 40%. Amy Rodriguez's voice crackled over the comm from the engine room. Captain, the reactor is running hot. We've been at maximum power for 2 hours. I don't know how much longer she can take this. Jake felt sweat running down his face. The Defiant had never been designed for this kind of fighting. She was a mining ship with weapons bolted on, held together by spare parts and determination. But she was doing something that the greatest warships in the galaxy couldn't do. She was winning. Amy, give me 10 more minutes. That's all I need. You got it, Captain. But after that, we need to cool down or we risk losing everything. Jake looked at the tactical display. There were still over 100 Void Seeker ships left, but they were no longer attacking in coordinated groups. The enemy fleet was breaking apart as individual ships tried to escape or find new tactics that might work against kinetic weapons. Lisa, Jake called to his communications officer, patch me through to the entire Council fleet. Channel open, sir. Jake took a deep breath. What he was about to say would either save them all or get everyone killed. This is Captain Morrison. To all Council ships, the enemy is breaking formation. We need to finish this now before they can adapt or call for reinforcements. I need every ship to follow my lead for one final assault. Admiral Kethvar's voice came through immediately. Captain Morrison, Your ship cannot handle that many enemies at once. You're right, Admiral. But all of our ships together can. Trust me. Jake turned to Pete. Target the largest concentration of enemy ships. Everything we have left. Sir, that's at least 40 ships. Even with the fleet backing us up, those are terrible odds. Pete, how many times have we faced terrible odds? Pete grinned. Every day since we joined this fleet, Captain. The Defiant turned toward the center of the remaining Void Seeker fleet. Behind her, 130 council ships formed up in attack formation. It was the strangest sight in military history. The most advanced warships in the galaxy, following a converted mining vessel into battle. The Void Seekers saw them coming and tried to form their own defensive line. But their adaptive systems were failing them. Every time they configured their hulls to resist one type of weapon, the humans would hit them with something completely different. Kinetic rounds, explosive missiles, and cutting lasers were too simple for their complex defenses to handle. All ships, begin attack run, Jake ordered. The Council fleet opened fire as one. Energy beams, bioweapons, and quantum torpedoes filled space around the Void Seeker ships. The enemy adaptive systems immediately began working to counter the attacks, just as they had done 100 times before. But this time was different. This time, the Defiant was in the middle of the formation, her weapons adding something the Void Seekers couldn't adapt to. Railgun rounds punched through hulls that had just configured themselves to absorb energy. Explosive missiles detonated against armor that had been weakened to resist quantum attacks. The mining laser was the worst surprise of all. As the Void Seeker ships tried to make themselves resistant to kinetic weapons, they had to sacrifice protection against thermal attacks. The mining laser, designed to cut through asteroid rock, sliced through their hulls like a hot knife through butter. Direct hits across the enemy line, Pete shouted. Multiple ships destroyed. They're breaking apart. Jake watched as Void Seeker ships exploded one after another. The enemy fleet, which had seemed so unstoppable just hours before, was dissolving under the combined assault. The survivors were trying to retreat, but the Kelani quantum destroyers had blocked their escape routes. Lisa, get me Admiral Kethver. Channel open, sir. Admiral, we've got them trapped. Now we finish it. The final assault lasted 20 minutes. The Council fleet worked together like they never had before, using their advanced weapons to support the Defiant's primitive but effective guns. When it was over, the space around Kepler system was filled with the wreckage of 250 Void Seeker ships. Jake slumped in his captain's chair and tried to catch his breath. His crew looked exhausted but victorious. They had just saved the galaxy, and they had done it in a ship that most people thought belonged in a scrapyard. Amy, Jake called to the engine room. Reactor status? Shutting down to minimum power. Captain, we pushed her harder than any ship should be pushed, but she held together. The old girl did good. Pete was studying his weapons display. Captain, we're completely out of ammunition. Every railgun round, every missile, every charge in the mining laser. We shot everything we had. Lisa looked up from her communications. Station with a smile. Sir, we're getting messages from across the fleet. Admiral Kethvar wants to speak with you personally. Jake stood up slowly. His legs were shaky, and he realized he hadn't sat down once during the entire battle. Put him through. Admiral Kethvar's voice came over the speaker, but it sounded different than before. There was respect in it now, and something that might have been wonder. Captain Morrison, this is Admiral Kethvar. On behalf of the Galactic Council, I want to thank you and your crew for your service today. Thank you, Admiral. But we couldn't have done it without your ships backing us up. Captain, I must ask, how did you know that kinetic weapons would be effective against the Void Seekers? Our best scientists spent months studying their technology and found no weaknesses. Jake thought about that for a moment. Admiral, sometimes the best solution is the simplest one. The Void Seekers had adapted to fight every advanced weapon in the galaxy, but they never encountered anything as basic as throwing rocks really, really hard. There was silence on the channel for a long moment. Then Admiral Kethver spoke again. Captain Morrison, the Council would like to discuss upgrading your weapon systems. Perhaps we can help you build better kinetic weapons. With respect, Admiral, I think we'll stick with what works. Sometimes old and simple is exactly what you need. Jake looked around his bridge at his crew of 37 humans. Lisa Park was already composing their battle report. Pete Davis was checking their systems for damage. Amy Rodriguez was nursing their battered reactor back to normal operation. They were tired, they were beaten up, but they were alive. The Defiant had started the day as the ship no one dreaded. She would end it as the ship that saved the galaxy. And her crew would always remember that sometimes the best weapon against impossible technology was good old-fashioned human stubbornness and a willingness to fight with whatever tools you had. Lisa, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them. The job is done. What should I say, Captain? Jake smiled. Tell them that reports of humanity's technological inferiority had been greatly exaggerated.